of Nelson Mandela, Graça Machel, and a group of people that called Village Reach in Seattle, with some help from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They designed a system, a supply chain system to deliver vaccines. But the vaccines could not be manufactured in that country. However, they found something that ended up exactly what you're saying, in developing local resources. The vaccines are live organisms. Essentially, a vaccine is they inject you like a weakened bug so that your immune system learns how to fight with that bug. But this bug needs to be alive. To keep it alive, you need to keep it cold. To keep the cold chain in Mozambique was a problem because only 6% of the population has electricity. So how do you keep a vaccine cold without electricity? So they started thinking about it. They ended up distributing LPG, liquid petroleum gas, refrigerators. But then they couldn't find anyone to sell LPG in that region. So they started an LPG, a gas distribution business. They created a company to distribute LPG, to run the refrigerators, to keep the vaccines cold. But they created a separate company for that. It turned out that a lot of people in Mozambique cook with manure or cow dung. So they cook with that, they dry it up and they use it to cook, or they cook with, sometimes they chop down a tree to cook. If you chop down a tree, you're desertifying your region. If you use manure, what happens is a lot of particles fly in the house, in the air, when you're cooking, and that is one of the largest causes of infant mortality, because it pollutes the lungs of the little kids. So it's a lot cleaner to cook with LPG, with gas. So this business that started to support, was started up to support the vaccine distribution system, this LPG business, all of a sudden found itself a fair and feasible business proposition selling LPG in the villages. And the business proposition makes money, but also helps the local villages. So in the end, it wasn't exactly what you were suggesting, manufacturing the vaccines in-house, but it was a side business that was created successfully. The business is growing and is profitable. Well, it will turn profitable very soon. So sometimes the spirit of your question is absolutely correct, but sometimes one has to be a little bit creative about how and what you develop locally. There's also a famous, one of the fathers of economics called David Ricardo. And David Ricardo argued essentially that you should manufacture where the place, concentrate manufacturing where you have an advantage. So in a way, there's a tension between what you're saying, which is creating, let's say, development, and then the David Ricardo argument, which is manufacturing where it's best, where the advantages are biggest. So you have to kind of juggle between both. But the spirit is correct. Yes, it's a good question. Sorry, long answer, suppose. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
They want to ask you a question. There.
Yes, please.
Can I make it in English? That's fine? Okay.
Yeah.
For what concerns disaster preparedness response, I know that there are some stocks all around the world. They are called white stocks. And they are positioned in strategic places all around the world when a disaster occurs, mostly in the humanitarian aid response. I think that everything is based on logistic in this case. I know that there is also a very big stock, I heard about this, in Brindisi, which is like in Italy, and you have several of those all around the world. Can you say something about this, like
yes.
how it's organized and how does
yes.
it function? Thanks.
So you're absolutely correct. That is a fairly recent development, the pre-positioning of stock, so that in areas that need to be of easy logistics access, but yet themselves not liable to or not prone to a lot of natural or human-made disasters. So, for example, the Red Cross has pre-positioned stock for the Caribbean region in Panama for the reason that Panama doesn't have earthquakes or hurricanes. And perhaps Italy is a good place to distribute to Northern Africa. Let's put it this way. It's been incredibly successful. It is today, I have to say, that if there is a catastrophe, the non-availability of stock is not the problem. Now the problem becomes the coordination between the different donors which is a nightmare. In fact, if you map all the donors that come in to help, either in a catastrophe or after a catastrophe, we have what we call officially a spaghetti diagram, spaghetti with meatballs, because it's all mixed and complicated. So that is a challenge, but thankfully at least the stock is not a problem anymore. It's how to manage that. The second problem we have that it's hard to work on is what happens after the catastrophe. So the first is to coordinate everyone trying to help, but then what happens is there's a lot of good organizations that kick in or jump in when there's a catastrophe, but then they leave after they think more or less the urgency has been solved, and then you have a steep drop in health outcomes. So that is things where we need to work more. For the spaghetti problem, we're actually working on that using mathematics and what's called linear programming to try to create a model of how all the donors interact. And we'll see what happens.
L'ultima, vuol fare una domanda veloce? No, no, ha rinunciato. Lì, lì. No.
Se ritiene adeguate le risorse che si dedicano nel mondo allo studio scientifico dei problemi legati allo sviluppo.
No, unfortunately, I don't have the number. What happened is, so first, the medical sciences were the first, naturally, to be interested in this. The problem is with the medical sciences is that the focus has been in different places. So today, for example, we have a medical doctor from Harvard in Zaragoza who is studying with us, but his training is so different that it's taking a while to adjust. Then economics has another field called health economics, and health economics also contributes to these kind of questions, but they also tend to look at things from a very macro, large-scale point of view. So the involvement of resources, of scientists from logistics is very recent and very small, I have to say, unfortunately. This happened perhaps in the last 5 years, although there are, for disaster relief, for example, Georgia Tech is perhaps most definitely one of the top 10 engineering schools in the world. They have a very strong, in particular in industrial engineering, they have a very strong group in this area. But even we are sometimes, like the donors, sometimes we as scientists don't coordinate. So we don't even know how many of us are out there. What I can say is that it's growing. Even business schools like SDA Bocconi and Bergamo, engineering, mathematics are beginning to help, but it's recent. So we don't know really how many resources. Stanford has a good group as well. So between the economists, the economists have been there before. The engineers we are kind of newcomers, and we're trying to help, and the business schools too. But unfortunately, I don't have the number. It's a good question.
Direi che, innanzitutto, grazie. Thank you to Professor Santiago Krasic. Il tema è interessante, come avete visto, dal punto di vista scientifico, ma soprattutto poi per le implicazioni concrete e reali. Speriamo che possa essere anche uno stimolo alle vostre riflessioni. Grazie per l'attenzione che ci avete riservato. Abbiamo parlato un sacco, ma ho visto che eravate tutti attentissimi. Grazie ancora.
Grazie.